The Bones and Bobbins podcast is now on Patreon.
Yay!
Would you like access to bonus episodes, digital extras, exclusive merch, and more? Then join us in the Curiosity Shop at patreon.com/bonesandbobbins.
Your generous support helps make the show happen and will also earn you our very eternal gratitude and entry into our private Patreon-only Facebook group.
That's where the party happens.
It is really where the party happens. There are some good people.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
We do. We have some amazing people. Amazing people. Like, I want to hug, obviously, in a non-pandemic climate, every one of them.
I don't want to hug anyone but autism. So, but I really like them and want to hang out. Yes. And we don't even know some of them.
Right?
Like, before.
Yes.
I love it. They're the best. In a dusty old shop on a forgotten old street, you'll find two witches with books 3 boxes deep. Next to rusty old needles and faded red thread, you'll come in for yarn, but leave with pigments instead. Whether poisons or patterns, we're always discreet, where creepy and crafty and morbidity meet. Welcome to the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Hello, morbid makers. We are your slightly creepy,
Mildly disconcerting,
somewhat sinister,
delightfully discomposed,
opaquely odd,
merrily morbid,
marvelously misanthropic hosts.
And this is Bones and Bobbins, Season 1, Episode 16, Talking Tarot. Pick a card! Any card.
I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Very Serious Crafts podcast.
And I'm Natalie from Uber Dark Designs, an official murderino maker.
Yay!
Yay! Hello!
Hi! It's been a weird week, I'd say. I don't know, 2 weeks time. It doesn't
Monday.
mean anything. Is it Monday?
Today is Monday.
Well, I guess Monday. It is because we're recording.
Yes. It's already been a week. Been a crazy week.
It has.
But in a good way. I mean, mostly in a good... I mean, we are free. We are free from tantrumatic dictatorship, officially.
Well,
soon.
not quite.
Soon. Like, we won the first fight in the battle. So
yes.
That's a good thing.
That is in the right direction, so that's good. And yes. Even my Republican dad seems to not be mad about it. So that's good.
Yeah.
I dressed Great Aunt Frances up.
She looks lovely. Just
yes.
lovely.
And on my other podcast, I was discussing making her a yarn wig since I've got a lot of yarn and, well, I'm not going anywhere. So Heidi, a co-host on the other podcast, Very Serious Crafts, has a tutorial for making yarn wigs, and so...
Ooh.
That may be happening soon, because why not?
Right? So I heard one of the most frightening phrases I've heard in a while the other day, and somebody was like, so, what are your plans for this pandemic winter?
Pandemic winter. The winter of our...
of our discontented panda. And that hits different when you're from the Midwest.
Yes, that is true.
Because you're already Initially I was like, that's fucking terrifying. But then it was like, that's the one time a year you want to hunker down and knit and sip tea.
Do you want to be on those roads?
No, you don't want to be on the road. So
no.
Maybe it's not as frightening as it sounds.
I don't know.
But my first reaction was, that's horrible.
Speaking of Midwestern things,
yeah.
New York City had a tornado yesterday.
That was so crazy. I'm like, you can't even see the sky because it was dark and you've got all the tall buildings, so you can't look for the glow. You know, the glow, the weird glow.
The green, the yeah. Sickly green. Well, it was already dark because we're on the other side of the time zone. So we wouldn't have been able to see it anyway. I can see the sky from my windows, but yeah, it was too late. But I was pulling up the radar and I could see the hook forming, and I was like, well, that's gonna be fun. And
it was
New Yorkers just don't know what to do with this information.
They don't. I was watching all my friends on like Twitter and stuff from New York, and they're freaking out. And it was such a juxtaposition of the conversation you and I were having. Because, like I said, I used to stand at the end of my driveway and watch the tornadoes come in. It was just what you did. So it was like not a big...
Exactly. I mean, you'll watch it until it's close enough that it's sort of like watching certain kinds of lava flow in Hawaii. Yeah. Some of that stuff moves very slowly. Like, you can outwalk it. Like, slowly. I mean, not like pyroclastic flows or something like that. But the viscosity is as such that you could just, like, sit in a lawn chair and drink a beer.
Walk it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the Midwest... And especially where I grew up, because I grew up in Southwest Michigan, and we just got a lot of tornadoes because we're right on the edge of Tornado Alley. Yeah. And so I happen to know that we're not even going to get like an EF1 in New York. The real danger is trees coming through the windows. Right. It's not like roofs going. Although I did wonder, all of the temporary outdoor restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one directly below my bedroom window.
Oh, my goodness.
And it held. So, I was a little concerned about that. Something like that.
Yeah, we had the winds have been pretty wicked the last couple of days. Today it's not so bad, but like this weekend... enough where like Ron Swanson was in constant patrol of the house, and just and he knows better, like I would think, but and he's old enough to know that it's noises that happened before, but he was just super on edge and just stalking the place.
Well, you could probably feel the barometric pressure changing.
Yeah, and then when I was gone to pick up the girls yesterday, when I got back, he was just even more, why did you leave me forever than usual, and I was like, oh buddy, I'm sorry.
Yesterday I learned that Jack, one of my kittens, definitely would not be a final girl in a horror film. Because just as the tornado warning happened, the eerie quiet and complete still happened outside, and that's like, if you aren't from the Midwest, that's when the tornado's getting close, because right after that comes the hail.
That's
and
the call
right
before
after
the storm.
Hail comes the tornado. That's how this works. We never got the hail, so it must not have been, I mean, New York City's tiny, but it must not have been that close to where we were. But when the wind picked up again, right after that, Jack took off running towards the cracked open window, which was cracked open, so the wind didn't blow it in. And I was just like, oh, you are the first to die in a horror film.
You're going to run down to the basement when you hear the noise.
You definitely are. Anyway, so that's what's going on in my life.
Tornadoes and kittens. Kitten tornadoes. All of it.
Similar, honestly.
Seriously.
Yeah. So,
So we should probably take a moment.
Yeah.
Just a little moment, a little quick break to thank all of our fantastic Curiosity Shop members over on Patreon.
Indeed.
And give them all a totally normal and not at all creepy thank you just for being them.
Yes, we adore you. And you also send us emails when we ask you to, which is amazing. Thank you.
With such good stories.
Yes. Yes, oh my goodness. And if you happen to be listening and you aren't a Patreon supporter, the last 2 Patreon episodes have had listener stories in them.
Yes.
Last week's was Ouija boards, and the next one is going to be tarot card readings. So you should maybe consider coming on into the Curiosity Shop.
You should. It makes a good holiday gift for loved ones.
That's true.
Like creepy and crafty.
I hadn't considered that, but absolutely.
Yeah. It's that time of the year. You don't know what to get your creepy cousin? Sign them up.
We got you.
We got you.
Exactly. And so, Patreon supporters, I just want you to know that you're the best. And we would totally go explore hidden old graveyards in the woods with you.
Even during tornado season.
Which it shouldn't be, is the thing. Anyway. Want to talk about... Yeah, exactly. That wasn't on my 2020 bingo card. No. So, speaking of things unforeseen, do you want to wade into the complicated world that is tarot cards?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the history of both playing cards in general and tarot cards because they're the same.
Ah.
Yeah. So tarot cards specifically, as we know them, are at their root a deck of playing cards with allegorical images on them. So they were essentially cards adorned with art that symbolized what would have been generally understood truths or recognizable concepts about being human and experiencing life. So often these concepts were illustrated by a fictional person or an object or a scene that would be a subtle or sometimes extremely not subtle visual stand-in for more complex ideas. And much like in our previous episode's topic, Ouija boards, many people really want to believe that using cards for cartomancy, which is the fancy name for divination using cards.
That's a good word.
It is. They want to think it has mysterious, fancy, spooky links back to ancient Egypt or Jewish mysticism or the Tantra, which, to be fair, would probably be kind of fun, but
I like all three.
Yeah, sure. Alas, there isn't any documented scholarly research that shows that these cards or similar objects were used for divination purposes before the 18th century. So I'm very sorry. There may have been divination going on in any and all of these other magical traditions or mystic traditions, but not this one.
That makes sense. So cardstock.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there is evidence that ordinary playing cards themselves were introduced to Europe in the 14th century, probably between 1375 and 1378, by way of Mamluk Egypt. So at least there is that little thread of connection for those folks to cling to if they really want to.
I shall cling.
Yeah. Playing cards definitely came from Arab peoples. That is a thing, and almost certainly entered Europe during this. Well, it's sort of both a time and a map of Egypt at the time, so Mamluk Egypt. So even though there isn't actually any exciting, spooky divination going on when they arrive, I'm going to tell you the real story about what actually did happen with playing cards, because it's pretty interesting in and of itself, and it makes it really clear how we got from playing cards to reading cards as divination.
Gotcha.
So here's the real story. In the mid-15th century, due to war, use of those recently introduced playing cards spread widely across Europe and were used to play regional card games that definitely weren't associated with the occult at all. And, somewhat boggling to my little American brain, some of these games are not only known, but are still being played today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Americans don't do so hot with the imagining anything earlier than, say, the 1700s. So, as these cards settled into the lives and cultures of different regions, the representation of the suit and court cards naturally began to vary a bit. So cards from different locations might feature slightly different items in their suits. And so when the cards did arrive, they would have been reasonably recognizable to us as decks of cards because they contained the suit cards and the court cards, not necessarily called those things, but that were used in the same way that we use them now in regular card games. So, how did we get to tarot, like tarot? So, the word tarot comes from the Italian word tarocchi, and the root of tarocchi, translates to foolishness, which makes sense for a game.
It does?
Yeah.
It does.
And tarot was being played in the 15th century, but was soon overtaken by a game known as trionfi, which was a game that was based on events, like festivals that took place during the Italian Renaissance. I am a little unclear about how that was the case, but it was. It's kind of hard to find the rules of a lot of sort of the transitional games.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so, through a winding pattern of European linguistic hopscotch and the Italian Renaissance, a game that was known as tarocco in Italy and taros in France, which would eventually evolve into tarot, which is now tarot, would emerge in the 16th century. So the trionfi cards featured 4 suits, which were swords, batons, coins, and cups, plus 16 high-ranking trump cards, which should sound pretty familiar to anyone who's seen a deck of cards. And as a bonus, if you would like to give Triomphe a try, there is a link to a My Modern Met article in the show notes that explains an early version of the rules. So you could give it a try. I read through it. I kind of get it, but I feel like I would have to actually do it to really wrap my head around it. So, drafting tarot cards into service for divination purposes began in the very late 17th century and early 18th century, and used various existing decks. The first known method of tarot being used for esoteric purposes in a publication from 1612 called The Fame and Confession of the Rosicrucians, which sounds deliciously sketchy to me because we needed a bit of Knights Templar adjacent action in here, was the first known, or currently known, academically known mention in a publication. So that's 1612. And so in 1750, the 62-card Tarocco Bolognese deck from the 15th century was known to be among the earliest decks to be used for fortune-telling. And then enter the 1780s, and the French aristocracy were getting in on the divination action using the country's most popular deck of playing cards, the Tarot Marseille, which was sort of, the charge was led by French occultist Jean-Baptiste Alliette. And we can blame a book that he wrote on card games for at least some of the "this magic came from Egypt" rumors. So we can give him a little bit of side eye right now. And a fun fact about that particular deck of cards, the Tarot Marseille became so synonymous with the supernatural that an entirely new deck, the Tarot Nouveau, was created to be used solely as playing cards for playing card games, which I thought was kind of cute.
It is.
Yes. So back to the cards. Almost inevitably, in 1789, Alliette produced a deck of tarot cards specifically for divination purposes. His deck was 78 cards and featured a major arcana that held life and spiritual big secrets, and the minor arcana which held life's everyday small secrets. Alliette's divination tarot was published under his name, but spelled backwards, so
mysterious.
Etiela, because pronouncing a French name that I already had to look up backwards is, I'm just doing my best here, so Etiela, whatever.
Sounds legit.
Anyway, was called the Book of Thoth.
Oof.
And Thoth decks are definitely still in existence and have a reputation for not being a terribly beginner-friendly deck. I don't have any Thoth decks because I'm kind of intimidated by them.
Yeah.
But this deck would be recognizable to modern practitioners as a tarot deck. But modern practitioners probably would read older versions of the cards very differently than their 18th century counterparts. At the time the deck was produced originally, the stories told in the image on each card would have referred to ideas, symbols, or events that would have likely been recognizable by the users of that time period. And
True,
so,
life evolves.
Exactly. And which kind of makes the more traditional tarot decks that we have today that date back from those times feel even more esoteric than they might otherwise, because we simply do not get the references. So they seem mysterious in a way that they might not have to previous generations. And so with this deck, Attila, I don't know, would go on to invent many, many modern tarot card spreads that are still used today. And he basically created the foundation of modern Anglo-American tarot, as we know it. Which doesn't mean our good friend Attila, that's where I'm gonna stick. Attila. I'm going to pronounce it different every time. Sorry, guys. Doesn't mean he was without issues. Attila identified his deck as having restored the original Egyptian design. And, well, it's true that playing cards probably came to Europe from Egypt. There is still no evidence linking them in any way to divination. So, sorry, guys. And now, it's time for a secret society.
Ooh, I love a good secret society.
It's connected to the Freemasons. Yes.
Tell me.
So, holy shit, the Golden Dawn. That is where we're headed. So, this is where Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers, Freemason, right? Freemason and head of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a secret society and mystical order devoted to the study and practice of the occult, metaphysics, and paranormal activities during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, enters the picture, and he brings along some friends. The Golden Dawn, which could be its own full episode, gratefully impacted both reading tarot and modern magical practice in general. They started by recording the esoteric meanings of the major arcana, but they also would codify the meanings of the minor arcana cards for the first time, dividing a standard 56 cards into 4 suits of 14 cards each. And obviously this is just specific to their work with tarot. They were doing many other things at the same time, but they were...
That's a deep dive.
Yeah, they were definitely imposing structure onto the larger face of card divination practices at the time.
Which, follow suit to, white males.
Oh, yeah, like they do.
Yep.
Yes. So, while they were doing that, they also made the tarot correspond more closely to the Kabbalah, which it was never connected to begin with. See my earlier thoughts on Jewish mysticism. Right. But I guess they've decided it is now. And they did this by making a few changes to the deck to make it more closely aligned. And so this particular organization, overall, may have made me want to give it a little bit of side-eye, but it needs to be given credit for how instrumental it was in creating not just how we read tarot today, but also the foundation of our current ideas of ritual and magical practice in general in the West. Like, there's a direct line to Wicca from there. There's a direct line to eclectic witchcraft generally from there. Obviously, also, there are, like, Celtic witchcraft and lots of other areas that it came from. But how we actually practice and the things we actually do in those practices are largely influenced by the Golden Dawn. And so here's where we meet A.E. Waite and Pamela Colman Smith. In 1909, A.E. Waite published Key to the Tarot, which came with a full 78-card deck, masterfully painted by fellow Golden Dawn member Pamela Colman Smith.
Ooh. So she was a Golden Dawn member?
Yes.
So there was women allowed, even though it was related to Freemasons?
Yes. The Golden Dawn, the hierarchy was based on the Freemason hierarchy, and it was started by Freemasons.
Okay.
I didn't dig too far into this. I believe that Pamela Colman Smith eventually arrived at the title of, I think, co-mason, and I'm not really sure. I mean, there are female Masonic-related groups, like
it's
the Order of the
North.
Eastern
Star.
Yeah, Eastern Star.
Yep. And they're not allowed to meet without a male present.
I actually have jewelry from that I inherited from my ancestors, who were part of the Order of the Eastern Star. So,
interesting.
Yes. Well, I also had a grandfather who was a Freemason higher up. So, yeah, I rather grew up around that. But back to Waite and Smith, because we could really go into a deep dive, and honestly, there wasn't enough time for me to fully wrap my mind around all of the intricate intersections between the Freemasons and the Golden Dawn and the Rosicrucians and the Knights of Templar.
And all of the things.
Well, and they're all sort of in a pot and stir 'em. All right, so Pamela Colman Smith was, in fact, a fellow Golden Dawn member. And the deck that she illustrated to go along with Waite's Key to the Tarot book was known at the time and is still sometimes known as the Rider-Waite deck. And it remains one of the most widely used and recognizable tarot decks today, and it's probably the first deck that most people, upon developing an interest in tarot, will buy. And anytime you see, like, a representation of a tarot card someplace, it's almost certainly from what has now been changed to the Smith-Waite deck, because Rider just published it. He had nothing else to do other than his Golden Dawn and Freemason connections. He was just the publisher. They just decided not to have the lady have her name on it.
Gee.
Yeah.
Fucking patriarchy.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, it's now rightfully called the Smith-Waite deck, because Rider
was just the money.
Well, yeah, he was just the printing press, I think.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
But I guess those men weren't very keen on giving a woman credit for her work, which is not surprising for the early 1900s.
Or any time for that.
No. And so, while we're on the subject of the Golden Dawn, I would be remiss if I didn't include a side note from a slightly later period in the history of tarot that could definitely be yet another deep dive separate from this. So in 1944, another book interpreting the tarot was written with the properly metal title, The Book of Thoth, which may sound familiar because of the deck by the same name. And this Book of Thoth somehow managed to rope the Egyptians back into the fray. And this book was... Right? This book was written by the infamous magicianal practitioner Aleister Crowley. And he would commission Lady Frida Harris to paint his Thoth tarot deck, but neither of them would actually live to see that deck's publication, which happened in 1969. Oh. So, that connection to the Golden Dawn is important because it's important to the history of tarot, but that's about where I'm going to end it because Crowley's a whole can of worms.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So back to the Smith-Waite deck and Pamela Colman Smith. Pamela Colman Smith, also called Pixie, happens to have been born on my birthday, February 16th. But in 1878, a full 105 years before my time. Yes, she was born in London and then lived in Kingston, Jamaica for a while during her childhood. And in 1893, she moved to Brooklyn at the age of 15 to study art at the Pratt Institute, which is a place that I have personally spent time. And on New Year's Eve, they do a really cool steam whistle event because they still have steam pipes everywhere on campus.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a fun life right there. London to Kingston to New York.
Yeah.
By 15. That's...
Oh, yeah. And I mean, there's so much of that happens at such weirdly young ages. I'm thinking of myself and all the bad decisions I was making at 15. But, whatever. You do you. Yep. Go on with your bad self, Pixie. Although
yes.
She was not called that yet. She was also extremely adorable. And
she was.
I sort of get why one might call her Pixie. There will be photos linked and on our Instagram because
she's stinky cute.
She is. So, while Smith was in art school in Brooklyn, her mother died in Jamaica. And Smith, too, was ill on and off during those years, and she ended up leaving Pratt without a degree. And so I'm wondering if maybe there was, some sort of malaria, something that maybe both she and her mother had picked up while living in Jamaica. I'm not really sure. And nobody speculated except me. So don't take that as fact. It is not. I am completely guessing. But her leaving Pratt without a degree didn't really seem to matter because she became an illustrator for books and publications anyway. And when she was 21, her father died. And she returned to England, where she continued to work as an illustrator and also in the theatrical design for a miniature theater. Her group of friends included, very casually, Ellen Terry, Henry Irving, and Bram Stoker, known as the Lyceum Theater Group, William Butler Yeats, just normal people.
Just normal people.
Yeah. And she would travel around the country with the Lyceum Theater Group, working on stage designs and costumes, like you do.
What a great life.
Yeah. And she illustrated some of Bram Stoker's later books, and she was just heavily involved with the art scene that was happening in that place in that time.
Please tell me that a woman named Pixie
that's where she got the nickname. She got the nickname from Ellen Terry, it would seem.
So please tell me that a woman named Pixie illustrated some Dracula.
She did not. As far as I know, she did not. The White Worm, I think, was what she illustrated. But, I mean...
That would make me giggle.
I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think that was before her time. And so, in 1901, she set up an art studio in London. Apparently, she decided to chill with the traveling around with the bright minds of her time. And she held weekly at-home evenings for artists and the local art community in general. All right. Now, here's where we're going to wade into some complicated territory.
Okay.
There's a lot of speculation about both Smith's racial heritage and sexual orientation.
Gotcha.
Many sources have described her as a biracial woman who had romantic relationships with other women.
Okay.
One, if not both of those things, seems to have been the case, according to contemporary mentions of her during her own time. But ultimately, most scholars on the subject have concluded that there is no clear way to identify whether or not she was black, and if she did, in fact, like the ladies. There are many strong opinions on both subjects within the scholarly community. We're talking PhDs arguing different sides, genealogists. It's what makes it more complicated and why it's hard to get a clear answer, because, I mean, if she was a woman of color, it would be a really, really great thing to know that and to be able to celebrate that.
Right.
But she was the only child of her parents, and she did not have children.
Yep,
so
make it more difficult to trace.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. And so I personally don't give a fuck what her romantic or sexual preferences were, assuming she had any. Because, I don't know, she might have been on the ace spectrum. Who knows? But I do love a shout out for queer ladies in history. So, if she was a queer lady in history, which, in my opinion, she likely was, but again, that is my opinion based on the few surviving letters and communications, and also, frankly, photos. And
also artist.
That she lived with another woman for 20 years.
Okay.
But that does not necessarily mean anything more than need a roommate to pay the bills.
Right.
So I don't know. And I mean, she certainly wouldn't have had a male roommate. So, as far as racial identity is concerned, Smith herself seems to have expressed a non-specific but not exactly white identity. She certainly didn't dress like an Edwardian white woman, borrowing heavily from the styles of dress that would have been normal to her as a child growing up in Jamaica, including heavy beaded necklaces and head wraps, and also an uncorseted dress. She also seemed to go out of her way to leave her background somewhat mysterious. Like, there's a story about someone thinking that she was Japanese, and she drew them a caricature of herself in a kimono. Like, it's very unclear. I mean, I don't know the circumstances of that.
Yeah.
It could very well have been that's cute. Let me draw this thing. I don't know.
What I know is I'd like to go back and party with her.
Oh, me too.
At least hang out.
She seems fantastic.
Right.
And here's where it matters a bit whether or not she was a white lady. So we do know that she grew up as a child in Jamaica. We do know that she also would later write and illustrate 2 books about Jamaican folklore and told Jamaican stories in a theatrical setting with miniature handmade props.
Gotcha.
We also know that the way she dressed was not, it would seem, a costume that she changed in and out of. She seemed to always, well, I mean, honestly, she's got the very boho look going on.
She does. She does indeed.
But at that time, that didn't exist in Edwardian England. That existed where she grew up in Jamaica. So, if she was a white woman, she was walking and arguably crossing the line between cultural appreciation and appropriation. She truly did grow up in Jamaica, so the stories she was telling likely would have been the stories that she grew up hearing as a child. So for me, as a white woman, it's a bit complicated because I can't fully understand the implications of that. And I'm sure that others who can would have a much clearer opinion on the subject than mine. For me, it's really tricky ground to traverse, and I don't know what the right thing to say is. But
I agree.
If we're assuming that she was a woman of color, as many contemporary sources during her lifetime suggested, it's extremely important to recognize that given how much of our occult practices we Europeans and Americans have borrowed or outright stolen from other cultures, that a whole lot more credit needs to be given where it's due.
Agree.
And in the end, Smith was hugely influential in the creation of one of the most common divination decks still used today. And her art is beautiful and interesting, and both timeless, but also very of its time. And she deserves to be given credit and remembered for her contribution as a woman, especially during that time, or as a woman of color, if appropriate.
Right. Or a queer woman of color.
Yeah,
that's appropriate.
Which would be even more amazing. So, yeah, it's very hard to... going into this research, I did not know. Like, I had always read and assumed that Pamela Colman Smith was a black woman. And I don't think that I had read anything about whether or not she was a queer woman. But I did not go in to this research knowing that that was a statement in question.
Gotcha.
And so I linked to several sources, one of which is a very thorough look at her ancestry and likely genealogy that concludes that she was white. And then the most recent scholarly publication about her, wherein the author says in an interview that there isn't any way to know for sure.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
Sad. I mean, she deserves celebrating. How much does celebrating?
Yeah.
Is a little open at the time.
Well, I think I would like to know if she was problematic in the ways that she would very, very clearly have been problematic if she were a white woman doing some of the things that she was doing. But I don't know. And no one seems, even experts don't know. And I'm personally not comfortable having a firm opinion on that because it's not my call to make.
Right.
Yes.
Totally agree.
And so that is the adorable, possibly problematic, and very talented enigma that is Pamela Colman Smith, who also just looks like somebody that you totally want to hang out with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She is adorable and just sounds like an amazing life. Like, I'm a little sad she didn't write, like, an autobiography because I'd like to read that.
A lot of her work, she wasn't recognized when she was around because not a lot of her papers survived. There's not a lot of first-hand information. There's relatively little of her surviving art, and we really only know or are able to identify her art because she has an extremely distinct signature. And it's very, very clear. And there was, at Pratt, I think last year, a showing of original art by her.
Oh, wow.
Which was really interesting. And I will say that the information there sidestepped the race question completely. So,
do you remember a time where we could go see art shows?
No.
No.
I never went. No, that's not true. But, yeah. So, there we have it.
That's amazing.
That is both the history of tarot and one of tarot's unsung founders.
Heroines.
Really. Yes, yeah. Unsung heroines. That's exactly it. So, there we go.
So I am going to piggyback off of some of the stuff that you said, and I'm going to talk the anatomy of a tarot deck.
Yeah, I tried really hard to leave it at the barest minimum.
And when you were talking about it, I was like, oh, I bet that was hard. It was hard for her to not go deeper.
Yes, I hope I did not step on your toes too much.
Not at all. Not at all. It was perfect. Tarot deck.
Yes.
78 cards, 2 groups. We've got the Major Arcana, which is 22 cards, and the Minor Arcana, which is 56 cards. Now, the word Arcana is similar to the word arcane and is derived from the Latin word arcanum, and arcanum means secret, and arcane means understood by few, mysterious secret. So, that is
appropriate.
Right. So, Major Arcana. The major
secrets.
Cards, major. So, the Major Arcana cards show the journey of the soul of an individual through different stages of understanding, awareness, and even possibly enlightenment. They talk about the main archetypes present in the world around us, and often they signify important stages of psychological and or spiritual development and evolution.
Yep.
Also known as the trump cards, which I hate even just saying that word. I know that word just, ugh. The Major Arcana cards include 21 numbered cards and 1 unnumbered card, which is the Fool. The Fool is the main character of the Major Arcana, and he makes his journey through each of the cards, meeting new teachers and learning new life lessons along the way, eventually reaching the completion of his journey with the World card.
That's what the Golden Dawn did.
Yeah.
They changed the position of the Fool.
Ah, that's interesting. So this is known as the Fool's Journey, and it's actually a really helpful way of understanding the storyline of Major Arcana tarot card meanings.
Yep.
So what does a Major Arcana card mean in a tarot reading? So when you see a Major Arcana card in a tarot reading, you are being called to reflect on the life lessons and themes that are currently being experienced at this time. A Major Arcana will often set the scene for an entire tarot reading, with other cards relating back to that core Major Arcana meaning.
Yep.
When a reading is predominantly made up of Major Arcana cards, you're going through some shit. You're experiencing some changes, events that are going to have long-term effects. And they're important lessons that you really need to pay attention to in order to progress further in your spiritual and personal quest. If many of the Major Arcana tarot cards are reversed, however, it may be a sign that you're not paying enough attention to these important life lessons, and they will kick you in the cojones until you actually do. So you need to first master that lesson before you're able to move forward. So
I keep my cards upright so I never get reversed.
So, Major Arcana. Done. Now you got the Minor Arcana, and that's the remaining 56 cards of the deck. And they contain, like you'd expect, minor or small mysteries or secrets, and they're often referred to as the pips.
Which is adorable.
Right? The Minor Arcana cards reflect day-to-day aspects of different frames of references in our, regular life. So, they may talk about work, or our feelings, or our thoughts, or our finances. And even though the Minor Arcana cards are called minor, it doesn't mean that these tarot cards won't have a significant impact in your life. These tarot cards relate to what's happening in your daily life and can offer insight into how your present situation is affecting you and what steps you need to take to manifest your goals or to change your life.
Yeah.
The Minor Arcana cards typically have a temporary influence, so they represent an energy that is moving through your life right now and that can easily be changed depending on actions you take, which kind of makes them yes.
Doesn't pip mean seeds?
Ooh, I think so.
Yes, it does.
That sounds correct.
I have looked it up. Yep. So that I think makes it even more interesting. I imagine that was on purpose.
Right. So there are, as mentioned before, 4 different tarot suits within the Minor Arcana. So this is where you see the direct relationship to a normal deck of playing cards. Mm-hmm. So each suit contains 10 numbered cards and 4 court cards: Page, Knight, Queen, King. The tarot court cards each represent different personality characteristics we may choose to express at any given time. Interesting coincidence, the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator tests have 16 distinct personality types.
INTJ!
And in a standard tarot deck, there are a total of 16 different court cards.
Do you know what yours is?
I don't. I have to take the test. Which, given I took it once upon a time, a very long time ago, because psych major, in there. But I haven't taken it in a very long time.
Yeah, mine apparently is very unusual to have if you are a woman, which I think is hilarious. But yes.
And yet fitting.
I'm a very scary INTJ. It's the Draco Malfoy of the Briggsmire. Anyway.
Nice. So, these 4 different tarot suits within the Minor Arcana.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with number 1, the Suit of Cups. Suit of Cups represents your feelings, your emotions, intuition, and creativity. Cups cards often appear in tarot readings about relationships, your emotional connection with yourself and others, and the cups are connected with the water element. This suit is considered to be a feminine suit, which I think is a bit silly, but there are some people that will do feminine and masculine readings, and there's a whole different world in that. But feelings, creativity, intuition, all these things flow like water and can take the shape of the container that holds them, like a cup, which is why situations described by the cup cards can often change and flow into something else. Then you've got the Suit of Pentacles, and that represents your finances, work, and material possessions. Now, Pentacle cards often appear in tarot readings about career, financial wealth. Pentacles, stones, or discs are connected with the element of earth, and that too is considered to be a feminine suit. The journey of the Suit of Pentacles takes us through ups and downs of materialistic situations in life. Sometimes they're good, and when they're good, they're really good. Other times, when things are bad, we start looking at the basis of the situation and examining the ground beneath our feet.
So we ladies get both the feelings and the money?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Make it rain.
And then, right? Then comes the Suit of Swords. Swords represents your thoughts, words, and actions.
And dicks.
Dicks. All things phallic. The sword cards often appear in tarot readings that are communicating your ideas, making decisions, and asserting your power. Swords are connected to the element of air. And surprisingly, oh my goodness, they're said to be a masculine suit. Shock and awe. The journey of the suit talks of situations where the mind can cause more pain than happiness. The suit's pictures are often not very happy. People tend to freak out when they see them. But there is a lot to be learned from what comes with the painful clarity of truth and logical thinking. One of my favorite phrases of my eldest is, "Why you gotta hit me with that logic? It kind of hurts." So I will forever associate that. So, and last but not least,
it's
the
perfect.
Suit of Wands, right? The Suit of Wands, and that represents your energy,
sorry,
motivation, and passion. Nope, it's also very phallic. The Wands cards appear in tarot readings about life purpose, spirituality, and new ideas. Wands are also connected with the element of fire, and they are also considered to be a masculine suit. The wand cards talk about the journey of a person who is passionate and desires many things and has many ideas. Such
fire
a person
in your loins. Oh, God. I can't help it. I am apparently 12.
That's fine. Such a person can typically fall into situations that are described by the Suit of Wands, and naturally they describe both ups and downs. Now, in a tarot reading, a Minor Arcana card will show you what's happening in your daily life, like we talked about, and how it's affecting you. And these are practical cards that can represent the interactions, experiences, thoughts, and emotions that you occur as you go about your day-to-day life. While a Major Arcana card will show you the key life lesson that you're learning, a Minor Arcana card will show you the key situation that you're dealing with currently. This situation is temporary and has the potential, again, to change based on actions that you choose. What does it mean when a tarot card reading is mostly Minor Arcana tarot cards? Well, when your tarot reading mostly has minor tarot cards, it's a sign that you're dealing with day-to-day issues which will not necessarily have a lasting influence on your life. These issues are just passing through, presenting you with an opportunity to learn from, and look to any major Arcana cards in the tarot reading to identify and understand these lessons and how they're going to impact your life long term.
Is this for like a specific pull, like a daily 3-card pull or something, or is this a general look at how you should interpret readings? Okay, cool.
It's a general look of how we interpret the cards, how the cards add up and go together. That's a whole nother thing in terms of interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one of the things that help with that is, now that we've broken down very basically and very briefly the inner guts of the deck, we're going to talk about its skin and how it kind of works together. So, knowing that the features of the deck...
That's terrifying. I'm having a visual.
Sorry about that. Those symbol systems that they employ, a tarot reader has a broad set of secondary information to borrow from. So, a typical tarot session involves someone with a question and a reader who has studied the cards and learned their interpretations, or is learning to do so, to help answer that question. And both can be the same person. Many people draw cards on their own.
I do.
Question, right? The question is spoken or asked. Great thought is put into the questions that the cards are shuffled. Every reader has their own way of shuffling and cutting cards. That's completely unique to them. I've seen quite the range. The reader then places the cards in a spread or a layout, with each position linked to a different part of the question. There are so many different layouts or spreads that one can use, that it's kind of crazy pants, but also
some of them
cool.
use all of the cards.
Right. And I have seen some people read, and you start out with the layout, but then you draw for clarification and throw in an oracle card, and then you could just go gangbusters with it.
I have never seen anybody throw in an oracle card.
I watched somebody pull out an oracle card for clarification.
Wow. Interesting.
Because it was just...
That hadn't occurred to me.
It wouldn't have occurred to me either, but yeah, you can use them together.
And I feel like people are going to be coming for us with pitchforks.
Yeah.
The tarot people versus the oracle card people. Because
and it's, here's the thing. It's all incredibly personal.
Yeah.
And like any practice of any kind, it should be personal. And it's about the intent. So don't let people gatekeep. I understand everybody does things differently, and that's okay.
I agree.
So the interpretation begins. So it's through thorough examining of the cards and how they fit together with the images that a story is told. So every detail and compositional relationship can be used, every color choice, every similarity to another card, and the conversation that follows takes you from one piece of artwork to the next, almost like you're walking through a museum. And the connection between these images on display and the battles that we wage in like everyday life is there. And it has to be said, it has been said, that tarot is the most popular form of art appreciation in the world today.
That's interesting.
Because of how the impact of that art has. So great art can speak to people from many walks of life with like wide range of experiences that they bring with them. And that art will reach out and speak to you. So 12 people can look at the same painting and have different interpretations of it. There's some artworks where there's literally security around it, and people are like, oh, it must be expensive. No, that security is there because people are so emotionally triggered by it that they're trying to protect it from being ruined, because there's been just even a color palette that has certain people react so violently to it or emotionally to it that it's protected.
Well, and that's actually one of the reasons that you can read cards for yourself.
Right.
Because whatever you're getting out of it, I mean, it's sort of like self-therapy. Which is absolutely really interesting to me.
It really, really is. So tarot is pretty much just a process of people putting together pieces of art in novel ways and letting these randomly generated metaworks speak to people's lives. Tarot decks are unique works, part art, part choose your own adventure.
I like that.
The symbol systems used are so vibrant and inviting that people can see their lives in a new and surprising ways through, like, the frame of the tarot card's narrative. And like a lot of symbolic art, seeing yourself in its patterns raises your own experience to new heights. It allows you to see things you may not have seen before. Mm-hmm. And there's thousands of decks out there that allow people to use new art that they relate to as a tool to do everything from draw on the divine or just to interpret their life and what is going on with it.
Yep.
So many skeptics say, but that can't be interpreted that can be interpreted any way you want to. It's all just hokery and it's all gonna just, but
I mean, it can be interpreted any way you want to.
It can be, but everything can be.
Yep, that's what I'm saying.
The strength of the tarot rests not only in the artistic prowess of the designers and the illustrators that create these decks, but also in the productivity of the system itself. The sheer mathematical ability for the tarot to generate meaning quickly surpasses understandable numbers. Yes, there are 78 cards in a deck. If you have a simple 3-card spread, left card representing the past, middle card present, right card future. Super basic layout.
Yep.
There are over 456,000 possible messages. These cards can also appear reversed, which then brings the possible combinations in a 3-card spread to 3,652,110.
Well,
you bring out the possible combinations of the Celtic Cross, which is a popular 10-card spread, and it's beyond the trillions. So it's not quite as random as you may think. So I encourage you to find a deck that speaks to you to give it a try. I was terrified of, and again, yeah, everybody mentions the basics one to start with, but one thing that I was always told too was that you need to pick something that speaks to you.
Yep. The deck picks you. You don't pick the deck.
Right. So because while you're learning it, you're going to, you've got to have that bond and that connection. You are your own first person with it.
I have never read the Smith-Waite deck. I have it, but I've never read it because it has never... I mean, actually, now after researching this, I may do a poll with it because I've now been knee-deep in... oh, wait, that's not going to come out right. But yeah, it never interested me. It just happens to be the one that's, like, kicking around.
Yeah. That
most people might stumble across if they're going to stumble across one.
Yep, and we actually had the same first deck.
It's true.
Is the Wild Unknown deck.
Ta-da!
And it's yep, that's it, and it's my favorite. But I also so my most recently acquired deck is Tarot del Toro,
and it looks cool.
The artwork is inspired by themes, imagery, and characters of some of Del Toro's most popular films, like Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak, and The Shape of Water. The guidebook, I mean, the artwork is amazing. And the first thing that I did when I pulled it out was actually go to the guidebook before I even looked at the cards. And the guidebook tells an amazing story of what tarot has meant to Del Toro in his life. So while there's certainly like cards out there of all kinds of themes, and you might think, oh, well, it was just based on there's a deeper meaning to how tarot fit in his life. And one of my favorite parts has inspired me to literally look at tarot, number one, in a whole different way, and number two, being newer to it. I've always been you should show the cards respect, but I've always been super terrified of just fucking up.
Me too.
Which you can't fuck up. Like now, like I
was very afraid of them before I actually figured out how they worked.
Right. It's very intimidating. But so this is my favorite part. And this is a quote by Guillermo himself. I started to use tarot not only as a storytelling device, but to hone my storytelling intuition, to offer nimble combinations and possible outcomes for characters and dramatic arcs. Oftentimes, the cards would suggest ideas that seemed improbable or foolish, but also unfettering and liberating. No matter what way you use these cards, you will always be having a dialogue with yourself. Shuffling and turning the tarot while pondering life's questions connects the cards to a greater matrix and the most intimate one. What you have in your hands now is a gateway to the largest truths in the infinite matrix of stories, insight, and fate. He literally used tarot cards when writing to determine outcomes for his characters.
I mean, that's fascinating. As an author, that would not occur to me.
Right?
It will now.
It was just one of those things that as soon as I read it, was just this switch flipped on, and I was like, can you imagine combining D&D and tarot together?
Talk about, like, a way around writer's block, too.
Right? Like, what's in this character? What is this character going to do next? Or what is... It's just...
Tarot and D&D, that would be amazing.
Right? Like, I want to make that happen. I say next year for, like, Extra Life. Have you ever done Extra Life? It's a specific fundraiser, and it raises money specifically for children's hospitals. And it's basically any gaming thing. You could go outside and play basketball and it would count, but it was started by video game people. But it would be really amazing to do a D&D run or an RPG of some sort run, and then everybody's got their tarot deck and they have to pull out their tarot deck to determine what their character is going to do next.
Do you know what's embarrassing?
Huh?
I've never played D&D.
That's not embarrassing.
I was playing Vampire the Masquerade at the time.
That's amazing. I love Vampire the Masquerade. I wanted to play D&D growing up so badly, and I was cock blocked.
I wasn't allowed.
They're like, you're a chick. Yeah, they're like, well, satanic panic reasons.
I was going to say.
Mine was the boys who were like, you would ruin it. You can't play. You're a girl.
My mom said no.
you
because Oprah said no, and Sally Jesse Raphael said no.
Oh my God, Sarah. Oh my gosh. A woman that chose those glasses has no business telling people.
I love Sally Jesse Raphael's glasses. Those red glasses are amazing. I would wear them.
Oh gosh, those big red glasses.
I mean, I would wear them, but it would be kind of ironic. Oh my gosh.
So that is a little deeper dive into the anatomy of the deck and the artistic side of it, and looking at things just from a different perspective. And as an artist, like it all kind of connected to me in a different way, between Guillermo's using it as a storytelling thing and then just looking at it as interpreting art, and it made it more comfortable to me and more familiar to me and less frightening. Like, now I'm like, I'll read all your cards. Like, now let's do this. Let's do this together, kind of thing. And I'm excited about it. I thought this was great fun.
Oh, what's also interesting about tarot art is that not everyone who does the art practices. Like,
right.
I have the Everyday Witch Tarot and the Everyday Witch Oracle cards, and they're sort of my lighthearted go-to, like if I'm having a flouncy day. And the artist, Elizabeth Elba, isn't a practitioner. She happens to be in my internet coven.
Oh, wow.
But that we are acquaintances, as she is more of a watcher than a participant. But I love her work, but it's really interesting to me how closely you would have to work with the practitioner writing the guidebook to do it right. And it's really clear that she did do it right.
The team that worked together on this Tarot del Toro is magic. Like, I just am super glad that I pre-ordered it. Oh my gosh, it must be almost a year ago, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did.
You texted me immediately upon arrival.
I know, I was so excited.
I just noticed that The Wild Unknown is written and illustrated by Kim Kranz. So that's interesting.
And I think there's I know there's for sure 2 Oracle decks that, but I don't have either the Oracle decks.
I don't know.
One is Animal Spirits, and that borders on a level I'm not. Indigenous people.
Yes, I know exactly where you're headed with that.
It doesn't sit well with me. It's not mine. It's not. Those are not.
It
my
makes you
cards
uncomfortable.
Right. And then there's another one that I want to say is Archetypes. I'll have to look those up, but I really do absolutely love The Wild Unknown, and it was the first one that totally clicked with me, and just.
Yeah, me too. Like, I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, that's that one. That's what we're getting. And the same, I have the Inquire Within Oracle deck, and that also did the same thing. I have the Everyday Witch Oracle deck just to support the artists, and also because it has a Witch of Color on the cover, and that is so rare that and all of the spreads on the back are also Witches of Color.
I have the Everyday Witch Tarot on my future purchases list.
Oh, this is the Oracle card of that.
The only oracles that I have is the Literary Witches Oracle, and I do absolutely love
that. I don't have it, but it has been lingering on my Amazon wish list for a very long time.
I believe I used some of the cards in our initial photo shoot for the podcast.
Well, you used some of the Wild Unknown ones. I can't remember if you used I think you used both. You definitely used Wild Unknown ones.
Yep.
But, yeah. Oh, but I can now picture one. So, yes. So I do know what they look like. But, yeah, there's just so... You can get so personal and so creative with decks. And I have a really stupid amount of decks. Like, I didn't even realize until I was pulling decks off the shelf to come record this with you how many I have. Many of them were purchased for fundraising. I have a Rescue Cat one that I have never used. It's cute, and all of the cats are actual rescue cats, and so the book tells the actual cat's story, which is very cute. But, I have, my core 3 are the Wild Unknown, the Everyday Witch for when I'm feeling fluffy and flouncy, and Bad Girl Tarot for when I'm feeling like a bad bitch. And and so they're all very, very different decks and have very different energies, but it's fun and interesting to work with any of them at any given point in time, and the interactions will feel very different.
Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It is fun. And so if you have been on the fence about it and had been feeling intimidated, I highly recommend that you flip through a guidebook first, and then you will see that it is just a straightforward thing with order to it.
It is.
That you can apply whatever it is that you need to get out of the reading to.
I also put in the show notes a really good resource site for people to learn, and that is Biddy Tarot, Biddy, tarot.com, and there's it's a really good resource for beginners. I think she offers like a free intro to tarot class, but just on the site itself, it breaks down the cards and everything in like a super simple, straightforward. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and it's not intimidating at all. It's very very wonderful.
Yep.
So,
and also you don't have to memorize all of the things.
Nope.
You even to be a skilled card reader, and I'm a pretty skilled card reader, but do I look up things? Yeah, all the time.
Yep.
Several times a reading, probably,
and that's
just
fine.
because I want to make sure there isn't maybe a little something that will trigger a thought in a different direction or something like that. It's
it's a guidebook for a reason.
Yeah, and I mean, there are certainly practitioners who've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, whatever, who wouldn't need to look at a book ever, but it's not. I feel like it's a point of pride for a lot of people that ends up being gatekeeping instead of welcoming. Like, it's fine to open your guidebook. I don't know any talented card readers who don't sometimes grab a book off the reference shelf.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
I agree.
Tarot cards.
Tarot cards, which brings us to our weekly worst way to die.
Yes. Shall I start?
Yes, because I still have to think of one.
All right. So mine is pulling the death card and having it be literal instead of symbolic. Which actually I should say, because I think that exact scenario is a thing that scares many, many people away from tarot. The death card is symbolic. Like, headed towards new beginnings, like a period in your life is ending and you're moving on to a next thing. It is.
Sometimes it's a really good card to have.
Yes. I have personally never pulled it. But.
Really?
No. I think through sheer willpower alone. But.
So, mine would be probably overzealous shuffling of tarot cards, wherein I end up, like, taking an eye out and bleeding to death. Some accidental paper cut that goes gangrene. Like, because I'm so talented in my fuckery that I will somehow mess up shuffling out these cards and risk death.
All right, so pulling the death card and having it be literal, and overzealous shuffling of cards and receiving a deadly paper cut.
Yes.
Both of those sound like they would suck. You could also die from both of those pre-penicillin.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Anyway.
So, do you want to be spooky internet friends? We are at bonesandbobbins.com. You can find us there. Mm-hmm. You can also find us at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest at Bones and Bobbins.
Yes, it is true. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. And I know everybody says that, but it's true. Like, really, really true. If we want to be on the charts and actually get more listeners so we can do more cool things, we do need likes and reviews. Even if your review is just like, I don't even know, an ASCII smiley face emoticon.
There you go. Yeah.
Like, that's fine. But the internet gremlins will only have us show up in recommendations if things like that happen. So please do them.
Yes, please.
Yes, we love you.
Pretty please. We do.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, let us leave you with some advice that you should never forget.
Mm-mm.
Lock your doors.
And don't run with scissors.
Don't do it.
Mm-mm.
Each episode of the Bones and Bobbins podcast is written and researched by Haley Pierson-Cox and Natalie Hoyce. Our music was composed by Loyalty Freak Music. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bones and Bobbins. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts so you won't miss a minute of our strange and creepy content.